My golden brother thought I'd overlook him, screwing my wife because he's always been my parents' favorite. But he was dead wrong. Now both of them are facing the consequences. My parents cut him off completely and made me the sole heir of their inheritance. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Sup Reddit. I've been keeping this mess to myself for too long. Figured it's time to share it so you guys don't get screwed like I did. I thought I had the perfect life and family, until one day it all disappeared with one call from my cousin. Here's what went down. It started way back when we were kids. I'm 28 male, the older brother. Quiet kid who actually gave a damn about school and kept to myself. My brother Kevin, 25 male, was loud, obnoxious, and spoiled. While I'm sitting there doing homework and minding my own business, this kid is running around the house like he owns the place. Here's the thing though. Mom treated him like he was some kind of precious artifact that needed constant attention. I'm talking full service treatment. She'd make his meals from scratch, do his laundry, organize his school stuff, and get this. She'd ask me to help him with his homework. Not because I was the older brother and should help out, but because apparently that was just expected of me while he got to sit there and soak up all the attention. The worst part? Nobody ever asked him to return the favor. Ever. When I needed help with something, he'd just shrug and walk away like I didn't exist. But God forbid I didn't drop everything to help His Royal Highness with his math problems. I learned pretty early that complaining about this arrangement was pointless. Dad was always working, and when he was home, Kevin would put on this perfect little angel act. Mom had already made up her mind about who her favorite was. I was independent anyway, so I figured whatever. I'll just handle my own stuff. Big mistake, because Kevin took that as permission to treat me like his personal servant for the next decade. The kid never learned basic empathy or how to actually work for anything. Why would he? Everything was handed to him on a silver platter while I was over here learning life lessons the hard way. By the time we hit middle school, Kevin had figured out that he could basically torture me with zero consequences. And I'm not talking about normal sibling stuff. This was next-level psychological warfare that would make the CIA jealous. Dude would sneak into my room and go through my personal stuff, looking for anything he could use against me. Found my diary once and read it cover to cover, then ran straight to Mom with every embarrassing thing I'd written about crushes, insecurities, the whole deal. When I confronted him about invading my privacy, he just smirked and said, "Maybe you shouldn't write such pathetic crap if you don't want people to laugh at it." Mom just laughed it off like, "Oh, that's just how brothers are." But it got worse. Way worse. School was its own nightmare because Kevin knew exactly what buttons to push. The kid knew I was getting picked on by some other students, and instead of having my back like a normal brother would, he'd actually encourage them. He'd join in calling me names, tell them about stuff he'd overheard at home, basically fed them ammunition to make my life even more miserable. The names they'd call me still stick with me. Ugly loser. Hairy monkey, because of my glasses. All that creative middle school cruelty. But hearing my own brother laugh along and add his own insults, that cut deeper than anything those random kids could say. He'd tell them things like, "Yeah, he still sleeps with a nightlight," or "He cries when he watches Disney movies." Personal stuff he only knew because we lived in the same house. The breaking point came during one of our fights. Can't even remember what started it. Probably something stupid. But at the end, Kevin looked me dead in the eyes and told me to kill myself. Just like that. No hesitation, no taking it back afterward. When I looked shocked, he doubled down. "Seriously, nobody would even miss you. You're just taking up space in this family." I was already dealing with some serious mental health stuff at that age, feeling like an outsider in my own family, getting picked on at school, and then my own brother drops that bomb on me. That's the kind of thing that sticks with you forever, you know? Dad was basically MIA during most of this because of work, and Mom had already decided I was the problem child who started all the fights. According to her logic, if I just stopped provoking Kevin, everything would be fine. The attempted hair-burning incident in high school was when things finally reached a level that even Mom couldn't ignore. Picture this. I'm sitting at my desk doing homework, and Kevin walks up behind me with a lighter, trying to set my hair on fire. Not joking around, actually trying to light me up like a human torch. When I freaked out and ran to get Mom, her first reaction was, "Oh, he was just playing around." Playing around. After he tried to set my head on fire, Dad finally witnessed one of these incidents firsthand and lost his mind. "Enough is enough," he told Kevin. You need to start respecting your older brother. Simple words, but hearing them felt like validation I'd been waiting for my entire life. After Dad's intervention, everything changed. Not just the family dynamics, but me personally. Dad pulled me aside and basically said what I'd been waiting to hear for years, that Kevin was becoming a bully, and it wasn't my fault. That conversation was like something out of Good Will Hunting, except instead of, it's not your fault being about childhood trauma, it was about years of psychological abuse from my own brother. I almost broke down right there because someone finally saw what was happening and believed me. Dad didn't just stop at words, though. Next day, he marched into my school and had a chat with the principal about the bullying situation. Suddenly, those kids who'd been making my life hell were getting real consequences for their actions. Then, he enrolled me in MMA classes at the local gym. You need to learn to stand up for yourself, he said. Not just physically, but mentally too. I'll be honest, a skinny, nerdy kid like me walking into an MMA gym was pretty pathetic at first. Imagine Napoleon Dynamite trying to learn how to fight. But I've always been focused when I want to learn something, so I carved out time from studying to hit the gym every day. The transformation was insane. 6 months later, I'd put on muscle, learned actual fighting techniques, and most importantly, gained confidence I'd never had before. When Kevin tried his usual stealing routine, took money I'd saved up from doing chores, I was ready for him. Caught him red-handed trying to ride off with his friends, using my money for whatever stupid teenage thing he had planned. When I confronted him, he gave me that same smug look and said, "All you can do is run to daddy like the little bitch you are." That's when I channeled my inner Rocky Balboa and gave him a perfect right hook to the face. Kid went down like a sack of potatoes, and I calmly took my money back from his pocket. The look of shock on his face was priceless, like he couldn't believe his personal punching bag had finally grown some teeth. Kevin started crying like a little kid, which was honestly embarrassing to watch. But even while crying, he was calling me names. "You fucking psycho! I'm telling Mom you attacked me for no reason?" Mom came running out and immediately started laying into me about hitting her precious baby boy. But when Dad got the full story, he backed me up completely. "He's lucky you just punched him," Dad told Kevin. Anyone else would have called the cops for theft. From that point on, Kevin kept his distance. He realized the power dynamic had shifted and he couldn't physically intimidate me anymore. The verbal abuse continued, but now it felt more like the desperate whining of someone who'd lost their power. College was my escape route. Got accepted to my dream school on a scholarship, and for the first time in my life, I felt genuinely proud of an achievement. Dad threw me a party, Mom seemed proud, and well, Kevin just sulked in the corner and made snide comments about how college won't fix your personality problems. That's where I met Alora, 28 female, at a frat party during sophomore year. We just clicked immediately. She was smart, funny, came from a good family, and actually seemed interested in getting to know me. We started dating seriously, and for the first time, I felt like I had something good in my life that was completely separate from all the toxic family stuff. Alora was my fresh start, my chance to build something healthy and normal. Coming from a religious family, the whole no kids before marriage thing was pretty strict. So when she got pregnant during our senior year, we made the decision to get married right after graduation. Looking back, maybe we rushed into it, but at the time it felt right. We were young, in love, and ready to start our own family without all the dysfunction I'd grown up with. Our wedding was small but perfect. Both families showed up, everyone seemed happy for us, and I genuinely believed I'd found my person. She was everything I wanted, loyal, supportive, and someone who could help me build the kind of family I'd never had growing up. I had this mentality that I wanted to be a one-woman man. You know? Like in those old movies where the guy finds his girl and that's it. No looking back, no wondering about what else is out there. I genuinely believed Alora and I were going to be that couple that makes it to their 50th anniversary. I liked the idea of monogamy. One person to come home to, build a life with, grow old together. Even when other women would flirt or show interest over the years, I never pursued anything because I was genuinely content with what I had. We had our routines down pat. I'd get up early for work, Alora would handle getting our son Leo ready for school, and we'd reconvene in the evenings for dinner and family time. Weekends were for family activities. It was comfortable, predictable, and everything I thought I wanted. But looking back now, there were signs I completely missed or just brushed off as normal stuff. Alora started having these moments where she'd just zone out during conversations. I'd be telling her about my day or asking about hers, and she'd get this distant look like her mind was somewhere else entirely. When I'd ask if she was okay, she'd snap back to attention and say she was just tired from work. She also became weirdly protective of her phone. Suddenly, she was taking it everywhere. When I jokingly asked if she was hiding something, she'd get defensive and say I was being paranoid. The coldness was subtle at first. Like when I'd try to be affectionate, she'd seem almost annoyed by it. Not pushing me away exactly, but not reciprocating either. Just going through the motions like it was a chore. Our intimate life started declining too. She'd always have excuses. Too tired, stressed about work, not feeling well. I figured it was just normal married couple stuff, you know? Everyone says the passion fades after you've been together for a while and have kids. So I brushed it off. She started working late more often, claiming big projects and demanding clients. I never questioned it because Alora had always been ambitious about her career, and I respected that about her. Plus, it meant more money for the family, so I just picked up the slack at home with Leo. The weirdest thing was how she started acting around my family. During our regular family gatherings, she'd seem almost nervous or jumpy. I'd catch her having these intense conversations with Kevin that would stop abruptly when I walked over. When I'd ask what they were talking about, she'd say something vague like, just catching up, or he was asking about work stuff. I remember thinking it was actually kind of nice that she was making an effort to connect with Kevin, since he'd always been cold toward me. Maybe she was trying to help repair our relationship by being the bridge between us. Kevin had actually been unusually friendly toward her from the beginning, which I'd stupidly interpreted as him finally growing up and being nice. But now I realize he was just being his typical manipulative self, turning on the charm when it served his purposes. I trusted her completely, so none of these things individually seemed like red flags. They were just minor changes in behavior that I chalked up to work stress, getting older, the natural evolution of a long-term relationship. I was so focused on being the good husband and father that I never stopped to consider what might really be going on. Sometimes I wonder if part of me didn't want to see the signs because acknowledging them would have meant dealing with a reality I wasn't prepared to face. It's easier to stay in denial when the alternative is having your entire world fall apart. Everything changed 3 months ago when my cousin Lucy called and asked to meet me for lunch. We'd always been close growing up, but as adults with our own families and careers, we only saw each other at big family gatherings. So when she said she needed to talk to me about something important, I figured it was probably about planning someone's birthday party or organizing a family reunion. We met at this little diner downtown, and right away I could tell something was seriously wrong. Lucy looked uncomfortable, kept fidgeting with her coffee cup, and couldn't make eye contact. This wasn't the confident, outspoken cousin I'd grown up with. I need to tell you something, she started, then stopped and took a deep breath. And I really don't know how to say this. My stomach dropped. In my experience, conversations that start like that never end well. It's about Alora and Kevin, she said, and the way she said their names together made my blood run cold. Lucy told me that at the last family BBQ, the one where I'd spent most of the time playing with Leo and helping Dad with the grill, she'd gone inside to use the bathroom and overheard voices coming from the kitchen. She recognized Alora and Kevin's voices, and they sounded like they were having an intense argument. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, Lucy said, but they were being pretty loud, and I heard Alora say something that made me stop and listen. The words that came out of Lucy's mouth next felt like a physical punch to the gut. What if he's yours? What if they find out? Lucy said Alora sounded panicked, almost hysterical, and Kevin was trying to calm her down, telling her to keep her voice down, and that nobody would ever know. The conversation stopped abruptly when someone else came into the kitchen, and Lucy pretended she hadn't heard anything. I've been wrestling with whether to tell you for weeks, Lucy said, but I couldn't live with myself if I stayed quiet and you never found out. I sat there in that diner booth feeling like the entire world had tilted on its axis. The words kept echoing in my head. What if he's yours? There was only one possible interpretation of that statement, and it was the one scenario I'd never even considered in my worst nightmares. My wife, my brother, my son. I thanked Lucy for telling me, probably seemed calm on the outside, but inside I was completely falling apart. I drove home in a daze, trying to process what I'd just learned, while also trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do with this information. That night, I started paying attention to things I'd been unconsciously ignoring for months. The way Alora and Kevin looked at each other during family gatherings, the private conversations that stopped when I approached, the way she'd light up when his name came up in conversation, how he'd been unusually friendly toward her from the beginning. I spent the next few days doing some detective work, checked phone records, credit card statements, social media activity, all the classic paranoid spouse stuff that I never thought I'd be reduced to. The evidence was overwhelming once I knew what to look for. Hotel charges on days when Alora claimed to be working late, text messages between them that were deleted but showed up in phone records, business trips that coincided with Kevin being mysteriously unavailable when I tried to reach him. The worst part was realizing how long this had been going on. Based on the patterns I could track, they'd been carrying on this affair for years while I was playing the devoted husband and father, completely oblivious to what was happening right under my nose. Within 1 week of Lucy's revelation, I went into full strategic mode. This wasn't going to be some emotional confrontation where I stormed out and made impulsive decisions. I was going to handle this calmly and make sure I don't get screwed, well, any further. First stop was my best friend Mike's law office. He'd been telling me for years to call him if I ever needed legal help, and I never thought I'd actually take him up on it. Mike recommended a family law attorney who specialized in high-conflict divorces and had a reputation for protecting men's interests in custody battles. The lawyer walked me through everything. We filed for a paternity test through the court system, which would be legally binding and couldn't be challenged later. I started documenting the affair evidence, securing copies of financial records, and building a case that would hold up in court. Next was protecting my assets. I opened a separate bank account and started gradually moving money out of our joint accounts, canceled shared credit cards, and got my name removed from anything that could be used against me financially, changed passwords on all my personal accounts, and started keeping important documents at Mike's office. The divorce papers were filed by the end of the week. Since we live in an at-fault state, Alora's adultery would be a major factor in determining asset division and custody arrangements. My lawyer was confident we had a strong case that would result in me keeping the house and having primary custody of Leo, if he was actually my son. Only after I had all my legal and financial ducks in a row did I decide it was time to confront Alora directly. I waited until Friday evening when Leo was at a sleepover. Alora was in the living room, scrolling through her phone. "We need to talk," I said, walking into the room with a folder full of evidence. Something in my tone made her look up immediately. I could see the instant recognition in her eyes. She knew this wasn't going to be a normal conversation. I laid out everything. Phone records showing deleted texts between her and Kevin, credit card statements with hotel charges on days she claimed to be working late, business trip itineraries that coincided with Kevin's mysterious unavailability. Alora's face went through the classic stages: confusion, denial, panic, and finally resignation when she realized the evidence was overwhelming. "I can explain," she started, but her voice was already shaking. "Go ahead," I said, sitting back and crossing my arms. "Explain how you've been screwing my brother behind my back for years." The bluntness of it seemed to break something in her. She started crying. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she sobbed. "Kevin and we just connected on a level that you and I never did. He actually listens to me, pays attention to me, makes me feel like I matter." I waited for her to continue, knowing there was more coming. "You're always working late, always focused on your career or your hobbies or whatever project you're obsessing over. When was the last time you asked me how my day really went? When was the last time you planned a surprise for me or took me somewhere special just because?" The victim act was unbelievable. "So because I work hard to provide for our family, you decided to cheat with my brother? It's not that simple," she snapped, suddenly defensive. "You don't understand what it's like to feel invisible in your own marriage. Kevin makes me feel alive, makes me feel beautiful and wanted. With you, I feel like just another item on your to-do list." "What did I do wrong, Alora?" She got silent. I continued. "You've been lying to me for years about possibly raising another man's child." That's when she really went off the rails, switching from victim to aggressor in seconds. "Don't you dare judge me!" she screamed, standing up and pointing at me accusingly. "You think you're this perfect husband, but you're not. You're cold. You're distant." She was building momentum now, years of apparently suppressed resentment pouring out. "Kevin remembers little things about me that you forgot years ago. He makes me laugh. He treats me like a woman instead of, then why marry me? Why waste years of my life and money I worked hard for just so you could cheat? Why make me trust you and think we're building something, Alora? And for what? For a deadbeat who can't even pay his own bills. And now you are blaming me that you fucked up? Yes, partly yes," she shouted. "If you had been the husband I needed, I never would have looked elsewhere. If you had paid attention to the signs that I was unhappy, maybe we could have worked on our problems instead of me finding comfort with someone who actually gives a damn about my emotional needs." She kept going, getting more hysterical by the minute. "I stayed with you because I thought maybe you'd change. Maybe you'd finally start acting like you actually wanted to be married to me." She'd managed to convince herself that years of adultery were somehow my fault for not being attentive enough. I let her finish her rant, then calmly reached into my folder and pulled out the divorce papers. "Well, you don't have to worry about any of that anymore," I said, placing the documents on the coffee table in front of her. Alora's face went white as she read the header. What? What is this? Divorce papers. You've been served. The reality of the situation finally hit her. This wasn't going to be some dramatic argument, followed by tearful reconciliation. This was the end of our marriage, and I'd been planning it while she thought she was still in control. You can't be serious, she whispered. You're just going to throw away our entire marriage over a mistake. Funny how you're calling it a mistake. I stood up and looked down at her. You don't even know if our son is actually mine. That's not a mistake. That's a complete betrayal of everything our marriage was supposed to represent. She tried one more manipulation tactic. What about Leo? Leo's not my problem anymore, I said. The paternity test will determine who his real father is, and that person can take responsibility for him. That's when Alora really lost it. She started screaming about how I was heartless, how I was abandoning my responsibilities, how I was going to regret this decision for the rest of my life. But I was already walking toward the door, grabbing my keys. As I walked out the front door, I could hear her having a complete meltdown behind me, crying, yelling, probably throwing things. But for the first time in months, I felt completely calm and in control. It was time to expose Kevin to the people who mattered most. I went straight to my parents' house. Mom and Dad were having coffee when I walked in. I sat down and told them everything. The affair, the years of lying, the possibility that their grandson wasn't actually their grandson. The shock on their faces was immediate and obvious. Mom's first reaction was pure denial. That can't be true, she said. Kevin would never do something like that to his own brother. Even after everything, even with the evidence laid out in front of her, she was still trying to protect her precious baby boy. But I'd come prepared for this. Don't say anything, I told them. Just listen. I called Kevin right there in front of them, putting the phone on speaker. When he answered, I went straight for the throat. I know about you and Alora, I said. She confessed everything. At first, he tried to deny it with his usual arrogant tone. I don't know what you're talking about. And frankly, I don't appreciate being accused of something I didn't do. But when I started laying out specific details, dates, times, locations, his story started falling apart. That's when his true personality came out in full force. Look, it's not my fault if women prefer me over you, he said, and I could practically hear the smirk in his voice. I'm better looking, more fun to be around, and I actually know how to satisfy a woman. Maybe if you weren't such a boring, uptight asshole, your wife wouldn't have needed to find excitement elsewhere. The room went dead silent. Mom's face had gone completely white, and Dad looked like he was ready to drive over to Kevin's place and strangle him personally. She came on to me, by the way, Kevin continued, apparently enjoying himself now. Kept telling me how unhappy she was with you, how she wished she'd met me first. I was just being a good brother-in-law, you know? Giving her the attention her husband was too pathetic to provide. I'm going to expose you to everyone, I told him. Nobody will believe you, he laughed. I'm the golden child, remember? That's when I dropped the hammer. Thanks for confirming everything, bro. Mom and Dad heard every word of this conversation. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then Kevin started stumbling over his words, trying to backtrack, but the damage was done. His mask had completely slipped, and my parents had heard exactly who their golden child really was. Dad took the phone from me, and I watched as years of disappointment and anger finally came pouring out. What you've done isn't just a betrayal of your brother, he said, his voice trembling with rage. It's a betrayal of this entire family. He paused, letting the weight sink in. I raised both of you to value family loyalty and decency. What you've shown today goes against everything I tried to instill in you. The disregard for your brother's feelings, the complete absence of remorse. It's unacceptable. Then he dropped the financial hammer. Starting today, I'm cutting you off from your college fund. You can figure out your own university fees. I won't be funding your lifestyle anymore. You think being a selfish, destructive person makes you superior? Let's see how you handle it when you don't have my money to depend on. Kevin tried to protest, his voice getting more aggressive and entitled. This is bullshit. You can't punish me for something that's between me and him, and you can't cut me off. I'm your son too. But Dad hung up on him mid-sentence. 3 hours later, I was at home reviewing divorce documents. Alora locked herself in the bedroom, and she was still crying. Then my security system alerted me to someone at the front door. The cameras showed Kevin standing on my porch, and he looked absolutely unhinged. He was pacing back and forth like a caged animal. I almost didn't answer, but something told me this confrontation was inevitable and better to get it over with. I opened the door, and Kevin immediately started laying into me. You piece of shit, he screamed, getting right in my face. You ruined everything. Mom and Dad cut me off because of your little tantrum. You couldn't just handle this like a man? You had to go crying to mommy and daddy like the pathetic loser you've always been. I tried to stay calm, but he kept escalating. Alora never loved you. You know that, right? She told me you were boring in bed, that you had no idea how to make her happy. She only stayed with you because you were the safe choice, the reliable provider. She did things with me she never did with you. The words were designed to cut as deep as possible. And honestly, they worked. But what pushed me over the edge was what came next. And that kid you've been raising? Imagine my son calls you daddy, while his real father has been screwing his mom for years. How does that feel, you pathetic cuck? Something inside me finally snapped. Years of pent-up rage from childhood abuse, the humiliation of the affair, the betrayal by both my wife and brother, it all came flooding out at once. I punched him square in the face, harder than I'd ever hit anyone in my life. He stumbled backward, blood immediately streaming from his nose. But instead of backing down, he charged at me like a wild animal. I'm going to kill you, he screamed, swinging wildly. That's when all those MMA lessons from high school kicked in. Kevin might have been bigger and louder, but he'd never learned how to actually fight. I dodged his clumsy swings and landed 2 more solid hits to his face before he went down hard on my front porch. Blood was pouring from his nose and mouth, and he was groaning like he might be seriously hurt. He looked up at me with pure hatred in his eyes. You're going to pay for this, he wheezed. I'm calling the cops. You assaulted me for no reason. Mom and Dad will have to choose between their violent son who attacks family members and their other son who made a mistake with his sister-in-law. I helped him to his feet and told him to get off my property. He stumbled to his car, still bleeding and making threats about pressing charges and ruining my life. 2 days later, the police showed up at my door with questions about an assault complaint. Kevin had filed a report claiming I'd attacked him unprovoked, and they needed to hear my side of the story. That's when I pulled out my ace in the hole, the security camera footage from my front porch. The cameras had captured everything. Kevin showing up uninvited, screaming threats and obscenities, making the first aggressive move by charging at me, and me defending myself when he physically attacked me. The officers watched the footage and immediately changed their tune. It was a clear case of self-defense against someone who'd come to my home specifically to intimidate and attack me. The failed police report was the final nail in his coffin. Not only had he lost our parents' support and financial backing, but he'd also shown everyone exactly who he really was. Mom called me that evening, crying and apologizing for years of enabling Kevin's behavior. I never saw it before, she said. But after today, after everything he said and did, I realize I created a monster. Living alone in my house after the divorce was finalized felt surreal at first. I'd gone straight from my parents' house to marriage, so I'd never really had the true bachelor experience as an adult. Turns out, I absolutely loved it. No more wondering why my partner was acting weird or distant. No more trying to decode hidden meanings behind every conversation. No more family gatherings where I had to watch my wife and brother pretend they weren't carrying on behind my back. Just pure, peaceful solitude where I could focus on rebuilding my life exactly how I wanted it. The house felt bigger, without all the tension and secrets filling up the space. I redecorated, got rid of stuff that reminded me of Alora and Kevin, and basically created a space that was 100% mine for the first time ever. Work became my primary focus, and without all the emotional drama consuming my mental energy, my performance improved. I was sharper, more focused, and actually enjoyed going to the office instead of dreading whatever family crisis might be waiting for me at home. The divorce process took 4 months, which in legal terms is pretty fast. Having solid evidence of the affair, documented proof of Kevin's aggressive behavior, and living in an at-fault state made things much smoother than they could have been. Alora tried to fight for the house, for alimony, for primary custody, but her position was weak and her lawyer knew it. The paternity test results came back exactly as I'd suspected. Kevin was Leo's biological father. That news hit me harder than I'd expected, even though I'd been preparing for it. For years, I'd loved this kid as my own son, and finding out he wasn't mine felt like losing a child and gaining a constant reminder of betrayal at the same time. Alora tried to use the paternity results to argue that I should still maintain a relationship with Leo, saying he shouldn't be punished for adult mistakes. But I couldn't do it. Every time I looked at him, I saw Kevin, and it made me physically sick. Maybe that makes me selfish or cruel, but I needed to cut all ties to move forward. In the end, I got to keep the house, most of our assets, and my dignity. Alora moved in with Kevin, which I'm sure was awkward for everyone involved. She went from being a married woman with a stable home to being the other woman living with a guy who'd never had to take care of anyone but himself. 2 weeks ago, Dad called with news that changed everything in the best possible way. I've been thinking a lot about my will, he said. After what Kevin did to you and this family, I can't justify leaving him anything significant. My dad isn't the type to make idle threats or empty gestures. When he makes up his mind about something, especially something this serious, that decision is final. Kevin had tried multiple times to reconcile with our parents, even showing up at their doorstep begging for forgiveness, but Dad wouldn't even let him in the house. I'm changing everything over to you, Dad continued. The house, all investments, retirement accounts, life insurance policies. It's about $1 million total. Kevin will get exactly $100, so he can't legally contest the will later. I was completely stunned. $1 million was more money than I'd ever imagined having access to. The only condition was that if Dad passed away before Mom, she could continue living in their house even though I'd technically own it. Obviously, I agreed immediately. I'd want to take care of her no matter what. The best part was knowing that Kevin had somehow found out about the will change and was absolutely losing his mind over it. Yesterday, he called me for the first time since the police incident, and it was the most pathetic conversation I've ever had. Look, I know we've had our differences, he started, trying to sound reasonable, but I'm really struggling financially here. College is expensive, Alora's demanding child support for Leo, and I can't find decent work anywhere. Maybe you could talk to Mom and Dad about giving me another chance? Family should stick together, right? I started laughing. Actually laughing out loud at his desperation and complete lack of self-awareness. Family should stick together, I repeated. That's rich coming from the guy who stuck with my wife instead. Come on, man, he said, his voice getting more whiny and desperate. Alora was just as much to blame as I was. You can't hold this against me forever. I made a mistake, but I'm still your brother. You're right, I said. Alora was equally to blame. That's exactly why I divorced her, and she's now your problem to deal with, not mine. You wanted her so badly. Congratulations. You got her, along with all the responsibilities that come with her. When Kevin started raising his voice and getting aggressive, his default response when things don't go his way, I shut him down immediately. Let me make something clear, I told him. You're no longer the golden child in this family. You're the guy who betrayed his own brother, attacked him at his own home, and then tried to file false police reports. You made your choices, and now you get to live with them. We're done. Don't call me again. For the first time in our entire lives, I heard my brother actually cry. Real tears, real desperation, real consequences for his actions. And honestly, it felt good. The golden child who'd spent his entire life getting everything handed to him was now facing the reality of adult responsibilities without mommy and daddy's safety net. He'd dropped out of college when he couldn't afford tuition, was working part-time construction, and living with Alora while trying to figure out how to pay child support for a kid he'd never planned to raise. Meanwhile, my relationship with my parents had never been better. Dad and I go golfing every weekend now, and he treats me more like a close friend than just his son. We talk about business, investments, life goals, all the conversations I'd wanted to have with him for years, but never could because of family drama. Mom took longer to come around, but she's finally accepted that Kevin made his choices and has to live with them. She doesn't bring him up anymore, and when relatives ask about him, she just says he's figuring things out and changes the subject. I got promoted at work 2 months ago, which came with a significant salary increase. My boss told me I'd been performing at a much higher level since my divorce was finalized, and he wanted to reward that improvement. I'm not dating anyone yet, but for the first time in my life, I'm genuinely happy being alone. The best part is watching karma work its magic on both Alora and Kevin. They got exactly what they wanted, each other, but without any of the stability or financial security they'd been taking for granted. Proof that sometimes the good guys actually do win in the end.